Well, thank you for inviting me. It's nice to be here. So the topic is climbing the ladder. This symbol of the ladder, it's found in so many different traditions. We find even this idea of Jacob's ladder, the ladder going to heaven, or some type of ascension. In mystical traditions, it's used more as we go higher and higher towards God realization. So it's a very nice image, and we find it used by Ramakrishna. In many places, we read the Gospel of Ramakrishna. We find the image of the ladder or climbing the stairs, somehow getting to the roof. This is a very, very common image that he uses for this ascension to God realization or union with God, or the highest type of realization. We find many different aspects of the spiritual life explained in terms of climbing the steps, and each step representing a different stage in spiritual life. So I came up with this idea to try to look at this journey that we have in terms of climbing the steps of the ladder till we get to the roof. And I tried to break it down according to different spiritual paths, because we all have our own ladder to climb. They're all a little bit different. And the yogi and the Gyani and the bhakta, they'll all have their own ladders. Some will be steeper, some will be more gradual, and they'll have different stages. So anyhow, it's a helpful image, I think, for any type of spiritual journey that we're on. We'll see. I'll give a brief summary in the beginning, then we'll go through these one by one. But we can look upon this in terms of purification of the mind and heart. And we can see this in terms of the three gunas. We start out with the predominance of tamas, and then gradually we take the rajas and we go higher and higher till we reach that sattva, that purity of heart, which will be the very top of the ladder. Then we'll see we can divide this ladder into two sections also. Sri Ramakrishna talks about the earlier type of devotional practice called Vedhi Bhakti, where we have to follow different spiritual disciplines, and we have to do a certain amount of japa and other things. And then we reach kind of a plateau. We can almost say one ladder and a plateau and a second ladder. And that will be anuraga. That will be passionate love for God. So we have this type of understanding. Then sometimes Thakur talked about the ladder in terms of lila and nitya, that the ladder represents the relative. We're going step by step by step by step. And then when we get to the roof, that's the absolute point of view, which equals nitya. So the lila and nitya, that and we can think in terms of also kundalini rising, and we get to the top, and we get it to, that'll be our nirvikalpa samadhi. The stage before that will be savikalpan. So all different ways of understanding these things. Thakur also talks about Anuloma and Viloma, another way that when we climb up the roof or we climb the steps, that each step we say, no, this isn't the roof. So we practice negation. We go one by one, that this is our neti path until we get to the roof. And then we affirm everything. The steps are made of the same stuff as the roof. So these are all different types of things. So that'll mean that the steps are all ascending the path of jnana till we get to the roof, and then we come down the same ladder, and it's the state of vijnana, where we see things in a different light. Then we'll find that there are all different teachings about the nature of the roof, different ways of getting to it. We don't all climb a ladder. He says some will climb a rope, some will take a bamboo pole. That means all different types of spiritual paths also. And then we get to the roof. How long can we stay there? Can we return? Do we jump over to the other side? They're all different teachings that we get using the same image in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. It's really very interesting to put them side by side and see how he explains things in different ways using the same imagery of climbing the ladder, getting to the roof. Sometimes it's a wall. Sometimes we get to the top. Sometimes we go to the other side and we can't come back again. So how long can we stay in the roof? who can come back down again, who can go up and down and up and down and up and down. Of course, that'll be only Sri Ramakrishna and a handful of other people. So this is kind of an overview of the whole topic. I want to go through these things in a little bit more detail. It's a big topic. So we'll just kind of give a cursory view of these different things. So what is the ladder? The ladder is really a symbol of our spiritual journey through life. We can say starting from the unreal and the state of ignorance to the state of knowledge, starting from the state of attachment to the state of detachment, going from this tamasic state to rajas to sattva, but it's some type of spiritual journey, and it indicates that everything is in stages. Sri Ramakrishna makes a very big point about this, that we can't jump to the roof in one leap, that we have to go through each and every stage, that he talks about, the board games. We have the Monopoly. If you get lucky, you'll get the card that says go straight to go, collect $200. We don't get that card. That'll be, he says we have to go through each and every square on the board if we want to get to the end. So I read a very nice thing, Swami Bhuteshanandi. He was saying that there are some people that they don't like these preliminary things, the use of an image, use of symbols and everything. They want to just right to the top. He said, unless we get in the first rung of the ladder, we can't get to the second and the third. So sometimes we have to start with very preliminary types of things and then gradually go higher and higher and higher. Some people, of course, are born with some very good, some scholars, and maybe they're born halfway up the ladder already. This is another possibility, but for most of us, wherever we start, that'll be the first rung for us. And it may be the fact that we're not all born with the terrible tamasic tendencies. Maybe sattvic people, but even then there'll be gradations in it. So this indicates that this life is a journey. We make mistakes, we learn from them. We gradually proceed higher and higher, even when we think that we're not making progress, even when we think that we're sliding backwards. Everything is an educational tool for us, and that there are no shortcuts. And this also gives us a way of gauging to a certain extent where we are in our spiritual life. Now, we're warned sometimes that we shouldn't pay too much attention, that people are always, oh, how do I know if I'm making progress or not? We have to assume that if we're sincere, that we'll be making progress. And what else will we do? It's not like if somebody says that, no, your progress is very slow, then we say, okay, then I'll give it up and I'll just lead a worldly life. This is what we do. Thakur talks about the hereditary farmer, that they have a bad crop one year. It doesn't mean they give it up. That's all they know, farming. So every year they do it. Someone takes it up as a hobby, and they have a bad crop. They say, I'll try something else. So we don't have to worry too much, but it does give us a chance to gauge exactly how much progress we're making. If we look at it in terms of purification of heart, then we can see to what extent we've developed a little bit of humility, a little bit of compassion towards other people, lack of selfishness, all of these different things. These will be different ways that we can see what kind of progress we're making in spiritual life. When we look at it from the point of view of the gunas, to what extent have we given up laziness, and to what extent are we overly restless? These will all be different types of signs for us. So if we look at it in terms of the three gunas, then we can say ground level will be a little bit of tamas. Ground level means we haven't even started climbing it. So a little bit of tamas, so we have to have at least a drop of rajas. This was Swamiji's formula to overcome this terrible laziness and indolence and lack of enthusiasm for anything. We have to bring in a little rajas. Rajas generally has a negative connotation, that we're overly ambitious or the mind is too restless, but we have to utilize that in order to conquer this tamas. So even to get to the first rung, we have to add a little bit of rajas, and then next rung we'll try to purify that. And this urge to do something will include a little bit of the sattva, which means this desire to lead a spiritual life, this desire to have some type of a higher realization. And we get higher and higher and higher, and we find that more calmness comes to us, and that restlessness will leave us behind, and then we'll get a little bit of this sattva. But in the beginning, we need this rajas. Swamiji warns us that tamas will disguise itself and make it look like it's sattva, so that we may think that, oh, we're very mild, meek people, and we're content with anything. We're really just lazy people, and we have no grit. Thakur didn't like that. He said you have to have great determination and great grit. So Swamiji, there's a very nice incident in Swamiji's life where some young man came to him, very meek and mild and humble. And Swamiji saw that there was no grit to him. So he said to him, tell me one thing, can you tell a lie? And a young boy, he said, oh, Swamiji, how could I ever tell a lie? It is not right. He said, then first learn to tell a lie. Now, it doesn't mean he wants him to be a liar. It means learn how to stand on your feet, do something. Even if it's something that is not good, at least do something, so that you won't just be lying there like a lump and no enthusiasm for anything. And then another time he said, these boys were studying Gita, he said, you'll learn more about Gita by playing football, soccer. That it means that we have to have little rajas in order to get rid of this tamas. So this is why Swamiji, his refrain throughout India was, arise, awake, stop not till the goal is reached. I did a survey once. I think he uses this term, this little phrase, something like 45 times. And I think maybe with one exception, each time was in India. He didn't do it in this country because in this country he felt already we're too restless, we need a little bit of calming down. But in India, he thought through years of foreign occupation, there was too much of tamas. So he wanted everyone to stand up, arise, awake, do something. So this will be climbing up from tamas in order to get to rajas, and then finally to get to sattva. Now, one thing that we find is that tamas and rajas can be lumped together, really. Sometimes I think we're better off if we only have two gunas, because tamas and rajas are very similar. Anger and hatred and jealousy, all of these things. Some will say that tamas, others, tamas means mostly laziness. But when we get to sattva, then this is the one that helps us. The others drag us down. Thakur tells the story, I'm sure you all know the story of these three robbers who grabbed hold of a man, and they needed somebody to carry all their stolen goods. So he carried everything for them, and then they said, what should we do with him? And one man said, kill him. And then he won't be able to talk and tell everybody who the robbers are. And then the second man said, no, that's too much. Let's just tie him to a tree. And then by the time the police find him, we'll be gone. So then they all left. The third man, he was a little bit kind. He went back and he untied him. And he said to him, now follow me, I'll show you how to get out of the forest and the way to your home. So they went all the way there. And then the man said to the robber, you've helped me so much. Please come with me to my village. My people will be so happy that they'll want to thank you and everything. And he said, no, I also can't go because I'm also the robber. I'll also be caught by the police. But he's the one who shows him the way out. So this sattva is the one. So tamas is the one who wants to kill. Tamas can kill us. This is the lethargy and everything. Really, we see with the terrible types of addiction, opiates and things. People just lie in bed, don't do anything. And this rajas binds us. Anger, hatred, jealousy, the terribly binding types of passion. But sattva saves us from all of these. But it's still a rung. It's still not the roof. So with this two-tier theory, we can say by the time we get to sattva, then we have a different type of practice. The Gita gives us a very nice verse that with this two-tier theory, that in the beginning, we have to practice what's called karma uchyate. They say that in order to reach this first plane of yoga, then we have to work very hard. Now we've reached that plane, yoga. We think yoga, it's good. We've reached the roof. We haven't reached the roof. We've only reached the kind of plane where now we can practice shama. That means shanti. That means quietude. And then from there, we get to the highest type of realization. So people ask, well, how do we do it then? If the shama means that now I realize that I'm not the doer of action, that I can practice surrender and everything. And how do we get from that last rung, get to the roof? We have our theory of grace. And now someone is up there ready to pull us up. Or Thakur gives the other example that there's a huge magnetic mountain. And we're a little piece of iron. We have to travel a long distance to get close enough to it, work very hard. Once we get close enough to it, we don't have to do anything. The magnet itself will pull us and attract us there. So he gives different ways of explaining this concept of we have to work very hard at a certain point of time, and then we can sit back. His famous analogy of raising the sail. You all notice that the boatman has to work very hard, he says. That the boat is anchored in the shore, and he has to lift the anchor, he has to row out, and sweating, and very hot, and a lot of hard work. Then he raises the sail, and by the time he raises the sail, then the breeze itself will come, that breeze of grace, he says, and the boatman doesn't have to do anything. If the breeze is directly behind, and the sail is full up, and he can lie back and just relax, and then he'll go the rest of the way. So this is that sattva. When we reach this very highest rung of sattva, then we can practice this quietude, shama. Then we allow grace to take place. Thakur gives so many illustrations. He said, if we want to chop down a tree, we just have to chop halfway through. We don't have to go all the way through. Just a little bit more than halfway through, and the weight of the tree itself will pull it down. This is grace. There's another nice illustration that suppose we have a seesaw, and you want to climb from one side to the other side. We walk up and up and up. As soon as we get to the very apex of it, but the very center of it, we walk just a little bit further, and it slides back this way, and we simply slide down. No more effort is involved. So first self-effort, then we practice this sharanagati, that we take refuge, we practice surrender, we just allow that grace to take over. So Thakur gives so many different illustrations with regard to that. So it's really, this is a kind of a ladder that has a little platform there, and the rest of it becomes automatic, just a question of time. Now, how do we know that this is going to happen? Thakur says, in the early morning, it's been dark all night long, we start to see a little pink, a little orange glow on the horizon. We know the sun will come up. We don't have to do anything, we just wait. So this is one way of looking at the ladder that way. So sometimes we think we get to this plateau, we think that we've reached everything. We've really reached that sattvic state. But then it's just a question of time. I remember hearing a very interesting statement that Swami Nikhilananda used to make. I heard from some of his disciples. I never met him, unfortunately. He said, the light you see at the end of the tunnel is really the beginning of the tunnel. Now, it sounds like a very cryptic remark, but suppose that, suppose that we're in a dark tunnel, a cave, and we're trying to find our way out. We see light at the very end, and we think that light is the very end. By the time we get there, we see that there was another curve, and we're actually seeing the reflected light from the other side. But once we get there, we're safe. Then we know, just a question of time, another short distance, and we get to the end. So this is one way of looking at this in terms of the three gunas. The sattva, it means that we've reached that point of real renunciation, real surrender, practicing absolute reliance on God. A very safe period. Once we reach that, we're safe. This is safe ground. We can rest there a little bit, and the next thing you know, we're there. We're up at the roof. Thakur gives one other nice illustration that when the daughter-in-law in the household becomes pregnant, then the mother reduces her activities month by month by month till it gets to the final month. Then she doesn't have to do anything. Baby will be born on its own. She doesn't have to do anything. Then after that, just plays with the baby. Now, the important point of this, or one of them, is that the daughter-in-law doesn't decide. We don't one day decide and say that, oh, I've reached that point of anuraga. I don't have to do this Vaidhi Bhakti anymore. I don't have to do my meditation, my japa, or anything like that. I've reached that point. It doesn't work that way. When we reach that point, these things will fall off on their own. Mother will relieve us of all of these things. They'll fall off. It'll be an automatic type of thing. And then we know that within a very short period of time, we'll have that type of that realization. Another way of a nice illustration. See, the beauty of Thakur's teachings is they're all stories. They're all parables and everything. Sometimes we read these parables and we get the main meaning, but we don't look, there's always a secondary meaning to these things. Take the bird that lands on the mast of the ship, and the bird falls asleep and the ship goes out to sea. By the time the bird wakes up, the bird doesn't see where the land is. It's so far out to sea that it doesn't know where the land is. It wants to fly back to the land. So it flies in one direction, it doesn't find land, and it comes back. Does it in all four directions, and then finally it doesn't find land anywhere. So it says, now what to do? I'll simply take refuge with the ship. Wherever the ship takes me, then I'll be fine. Now, main point is that we want to practice this resignation and surrender and acceptance. But the secondary point is we won't be able to do it unless we struggle. The bird had to fly as far as it could in each direction, turn around only when it reached the point where it thought that it won't have the strength to get back, and then rest a while. So we have to go through all of that hard work, climbing up that ladder, till we get to that point at the very end. That point is sattva, and then the ship will take us to the final goal. So these are all very beautiful teachings about the different stages. And as I say, we have the three gunas. We can almost look at it as two stages. And we have self-effort, and then resignation, acceptance, sharanagati, however we understand it. This will be, for most of us, or for many people, the final rung on the ladder. Once we reach that point where we can accept everything. Either we say mother's will, or we say, we can even say it's my karma. What can I do? It's my karma. I accept it. And without the slightest bit of mental agitation or anything. Then we know that we're very close to the top. See, we have to assume if there's a ladder, there's a roof. And we're not just going on endlessly, that we'll ultimately realize that also these are different signs, ways that we can understand it. We look at the Gita, the entire Gita. This is a very interesting turn of events in the Gita. What is the main theme of the Gita? Anybody? Okay, we can say that, but before that, Dharma, main theme is Dharma. The whole thing that Sri Krishna is beating into the head of Arjuna, you have to perform your duty. Then what is the very final teaching? Sharanagati. Sarva dharmam parityaja. Give up all this idea of duty and everything and practice surrender. So why didn't he tell him that in the beginning? Just practice surrender. Because he wasn't on that stage of the ladder. He had to get to the point, climbing up and up and up and understanding the purpose of duty and karma yoga and all of that, to be able to reach that point where you can say, yes, there's something beyond all of this. And we won't get it by non-performance. See, Sri Krishna says nobody reaches this, the non-performance, this nice karma siddhi, this state of perfection without performance of action. So that means we can't skip these different rungs of the ladder. We have to go one by one to all of these. Okay, now, what about the ladder for the Gyani? This is mostly so far, this we can say with the three gunas is a kind of a general thing, but it's mostly the path of devotion, we can say. The ladder for the Gyani is a very tricky thing because somehow the first rung is the roof for the Gyani. The Gyani has to start out. What that means is if we look at the image of the two birds, you know, this is a parable. This is a very famous Vedic verse that we find in the Mundaka Upanishad. Other Upanishads, I think 3 different Upanishads have it, about the two birds on the same tree. And Swamiji turns it into a parable. And he says that the lower bird ultimately realizes that it's actually the higher bird. That in the beginning, this lower bird is jumping around, eating the different fruits. Some are sweet, some are bitter. And he sees this other bird at the top of the tree, majestic and calm, peaceful, just watching, not doing anything, and feels some attraction, jumps up a little higher, and forgets, higher and higher, higher, climbing the ladder. By the time he gets to the top, it realizes it was that bird at the very beginning, seeing a reflection of itself, forgetting who it really was, and everything. So for the Gyani, there's a ladder, there's a progress, but the beginning of the spiritual path of the Gyani is the same as the end. Gyani starts out, Soham, I'm one with that ultimate reality. The Bhakta can start out with this complete separation. I'm just a servant of God. God is the master. My relationship is one just of servant to master. I'm not related in any other way, but this cord of love brings us closer and closer and closer until we start to feel a certain union and oneness. And Thakur says the roof means oneness with everyone. So this devotional cord, bhakti, it brings us closer and closer and closer. So for the Gyani, this ladder is a kind of illusory ladder, but it still has to be climbed. And we understand this because the path of the Gyani involves this neti. I mentioned in the beginning, the neti, that we try to ask this question, who am I? What is my real nature? And the bottom rung is when we say, what is my nature? My nature is a body, mind, complex, that I dwell within all of this, but this is me. Who am I? This is me. That feeling. Then a little discrimination comes and we ask ourselves, well, the body is changing. This is not the same body I had when I was born. It's completely different and everything. We start to get this feeling that I am not that. So we start to practice this neti. Then what about the senses? Well, we get very old. Sometimes we lose our sight or hearing, everything. I'm the same person. I'm the same person. I can lose all of my senses. I can lose this whole body. I have this image in mind sometimes of somebody who in a terrible car accident, and somehow they're saved, and while they're unconscious, they're given a whole new body, so that the face is completely, everything is completely different, and their eyes are different, sense of hearing may be different, everything may be different. When they wake up, will they have any idea? Absolutely no idea. They'll look in the mirror and say, oh, what happened? Sense of identity is just from pure awareness. I am that I am. This is my. So the Gyani starts to understand that little by little, climbing higher and higher. Then getting to the roof, we get the opposite thing. So Sri Ramakrishna says this Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, that Brahman alone is real, this world is unreal. He says this is not a final truth. This is not a truth at all. This is for the sake of sadhana. It's a very interesting way of explaining it. The Gyani generally will say this is the final truth, that this world is illusory, this world is unreal. Thakur says no, that we've mixed ourselves up with this world, And for the sake of separating, we make two categories. 1880 is a dualistic philosophy. There's Sat and there's Asat. There are two things. It's a dualistic. Of course, the Gyani may say, no, that what we're calling Asat doesn't exist at all, but we know that we see it. We're talking about this universe and everything. So Sri Ramakrishna says that this is for the sake of being able to take that ultimate reality, which is the self, which is mixed up with body, mind, senses, and everything else, and extract that. We have to know what's not the self in order to extract it. And when we know it, or we look at the physical objects, that we have to say that the name and form are unreal. There's some substance underlying all of it. But what he says is when we get to the roof, then we say the same material that the steps were made of. The roof is made of the same thing. So he says when we come down, then we see that everything's a manifestation of that same oneness. So for Sri Ramakrishna, this Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma, this is for Shankaracharya a kind of secondary. He doesn't count this as one of the Mahavakyas. It's kind of a secondary truth. All this is nothing but Brahman itself. For Sri Ramakrishna, this is the truth of Vijnana. This is somehow higher for him. So there's no difference in the real philosophy, difference in the point of view. When Swami Turiyananda, who was a great Gyani, when he passed away, he was supposed to have said, you hear this, that Brahma Satyam, Jagat Satyam, that Brahman is real, this world is real, because now we know it is nothing but Brahman. Somebody asked Ramakrishna once, is this world then unreal? And he gave the most curious answer. He said, as long as one has not realized God, this world is unreal. Now, normally the Gyani will say that because you're in a state of ignorance, you think it's real. When you have knowledge, you know it's unreal. He says the opposite. That once we realize God, then we'll see that this world is nothing but the glory, Aishwarya, the glory of God, of the Divine Mother, that way. So those who have had that highest realization, that state of jnana, then the world will disappear. They'll be in the roof. They come down one rung from that. Then that's a state of vijnana, and they see everything as divine. Thakur will say everything as chinmaya, everything the manifestation of consciousness. And he saw the self dwelling within all beings, Divine Mother dwelling within all beings. So this is that ladder for the Gyani is a little bit different from the ladder for the others. Okay, then let's look at the ladder for the yogi. Now, remember, these are not really distinct ladders. We combine all of them. Our ladder is a combination of all the yogas. This was Swamiji's ideal. But for those who really like to look at spiritual life in terms of meditation, in terms of the meditative path, then we can look at this ladder in a few different ways, that each rung will be part of this eightfold path, Ashtanga Yoga, that we have to start out with our yama and niyama and all the preliminaries and everything. We get a little bit higher up and we reach that state, pratyahara, where we withdraw. We get a little higher. We're able to concentrate the mind. We go a little higher. We go deeper in meditation. And finally, we get to the roof and we reach that state of samadhi, however we understand it, nirvikalpa samadhi, savikalpa samadhi. And then we're at that state where the mind, we say mano nasha, we say the mind is destroyed. It's not really destroyed. For the moment, it's destroyed. For the moment, it's not there. If it were really destroyed, then we couldn't go back down again. But we see that these great souls, they come down from samadhi. The mind is there purified. So this ordinary mind is gone, but this pure mind is there, and this transformed mind. So this is the state. See, the state of vijnana is for both the Gyani and the Bhakta. For the Bhakta, the state of vijnana is one where the ripe ego is a devotional ego. Thakur really, we know that we can't pigeonhole him into any one singular path, but he liked this devotional ego. He preferred it. When he came back down, he liked to feel that he was a child of the Divine Mother. This was the way he could keep the mind down in the world. He used to say for Shankaracharya, it was the ego of knowledge. He was also a Gyani. After the highest realization, he lived in the world with this feeling, I'm one with that reality. This world is a little dreamlike. Not so much the glory of the Divine Mother, but this veil of Maya, making us see name and form. A little bit different, but still that state of perfection living in the world. So we can look at climbing up to the roof of these different stages of Ashtanga Yoga, the different eight limbs of yoga. We can look at it in terms of the Shakti, this Kundalini Shakti rising up through the different chakras. So each rung will be go a little higher and higher and higher till we get to the Sahasrara, we get to the 1,000-petal lotus at the top of the head. Now I want to just mention, there's a very tricky question about what about the roof? What do we do when we get to the roof? Can we all get there? Can we come back down again? Can we go for a little stroll? Can we just peek up and look? We stay there too long? Do we jump over to the other side? The Thakur gives all of these different illustrations. You know the story of the friends who were walking down the road. There's a high wall on one side, and they hear music and singing and laughter and everything. And they say, oh, what is it? So one by one, they climb to the top and they look over, and it's so joyful that they can't help themselves. One by one, they jump over. Then the last friend, he goes up. Somehow he has a presence of mind, and he has some compassion for others. And he says, oh, let me go back and tell everybody how much joy there is on the other side. So he goes back down. Now, Sri Ramakrishna says, this is the avatar. This is the Ishvara Koti, those who are born with a special mission in life. But he's very vague on these things. Sometimes he'll say that someone just harbors a desire to help others. They can be what he calls Nitya Siddha. Nitya Siddha, ever perfect. We have two different classes of Nitya Siddha. Those who were born without any karma, and just life after life, they'll be the companions of the avatar and everything. And those who are like the Bodhisattva in the Buddhist tradition, that maybe they were born with karma and everything, and they had to achieve their own liberation, but they were willing to wait and come back and work for the welfare of others. And so then they'll be born again and again if they like. After that, without any karma, just out of this sheer power of goodness. So we have that type of idea. Then Sri Ramakrishna says there'll be those who can reach the roof, but they'll still have a little karma, either or some desires. Either they harbor that good desire to work for others, or they have some old karma. And like the brick tied to the tail of the mongoose. These little boys, he says, that these mongoose, they live in little holes in these brick walls sometimes, and while they're sleeping there, they'll tie a brick, and then they'll pull it down. The mongoose tries to climb up. When it gets high enough, then the weight of the brick pulls it down. So a little bit of desire that we may have, a little bit of karma still there, may pull us back down again. Then it may be that we simply go up and we look. We never leave that last rung. But this is enough to give us realization. Because the question is, how do we become a Jivan Mukta if we're not one of these God relay souls? And do we really want to spend our whole life doing spiritual practice so that one day we'll have Nirvikalpa Samadhi and we'll never come back down again? How many people will vote yes for that? Huh? We want to enjoy it, of course. Yeah. So this is one way of understanding that until our prarabdha karma is all exhausted and it's time for us to depart this world, that we can have at least that glimpse and have that transformation that we live in the world as a free soul. because Thakur talks about the Jivan Muktas. In fact, very often we get the impression that it's only those who have this Nirvikalpa Samadhi experience that will have trouble bringing the mind back down again. There's no one to bring it back down. That's the whole problem. It has to be some grace or divine mother or karma or something. The bird is already flown out. No way to get it back in again. But just short of that, then we can come back down again. So we get this picture that the path of meditation is more difficult. If we really have this Nirvikalpa Samadhi, there'll be no desire to come back down. You know, even this near-death experience, that people very often say that they have no desire to go back into the body, that somehow they get pulled back. Sometimes they're very disappointed. They thought it was so joyful there, but I got pulled back somehow. So, but on the other path of devotion, karma yoga and everything, we can also have this highest type of realization without this fear, if it is a fear, that will give up the body at the same time. So this seems to be really just for those who may reach that state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. But Thakur is very, I would say, vague on this topic. He gives lots of different types of alternative explanations, and I think on purpose. I think partly because we're all different levels. We have different levels and different degrees of ability to hold spirituality. Thakur has this theory of the adhar. He talked about adhar. Adhar is a container, that we're all different size and shaped containers. And some can withstand a great deal of spiritual exaltation and ecstasy and realization and everything. And others a little bit will be too much for them. Thakur used to say that Swamiji, he was a huge vessel. He was a huge vessel. So even among the Ishvara Kotis, there's a gradation that some can handle this highest type of samadhi. Others will get merged in that. Some can come back more easily. Some can go up and down, up and down. We don't even Nirvikalpa Samadhi among the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna is a very rare thing. If you read the biography of Swami Vivekananda by the Eastern and Western disciples, it's a very authentic biography written mostly by his disciple Swami Virajanandini. They say that Swamiji had, as far as we know, Nirvikalpa Samadhi only 4 times in his life. Only 4 times. Now there may have been many other times. And of course, we know that Thakur said, I'm going to keep this veil from you. You have work to do and everything. We can look at it that way a little bit, but it's a very rare type of thing. So we shouldn't have any fear that we're going to have Nirvikalpa Samadhi and give up the body. That's not going to happen. But we should understand that this doesn't mean that we won't get liberation, or if we get liberation, that's the end of it. So I was saying that Thakur's a little vague on this, and I say that because partly statements that he made about Shukadeva. Shukadeva was supposed to have been absolutely pure from his childhood and perfectly realized soul. So the question was asked, well, what about Shukadeva? How did he live in the world after the highest type of realization? And Ramakrishna says, some say that Shukadeva saw the ocean of the absolute Brahman and touched its waters. That means he's standing at the top of the ladder and he's looking at everything on the roof as a perfect, complete experience, but keeps 1 foot in the rug. So some say that Shukadeva saw the ocean of the absolute Brahman and touched its waters, but he did not go into the water. Therefore, he was able to come back and teach mankind. So the one theory. Others believe that he attained to the absolute Brahman and then returned to help humanity. So the point of all this is that there's no doctrine here, that it has to be understood one way and not another way, that these are all mysterious kinds of things. And the question of how much we can withstand, even the path of devotion. You know, we often talk about the Ishvara Kotis being able to come back from Nirvikalpa Samadhi. But Thakur even says in the devotional path, only the avatar and these very great souls can withstand this mahabhav and prema. The highest type of devotion is also reserved for very special souls. Otherwise, he says, it's like an elephant going to a little straw hut. It'll destroy it. Even Swamiji, who was such a great soul, he had such an intense experience when he went to Amarnath that they say his health was practically shattered after that. Probably his heart was enlarged, he had blood clot in one eye, all sorts of things. His health really got destroyed after that. So if even someone like Swamiji it has some limitation with regard to the size, that adhar, then we understand that these things, some of these things are reserved for very special people. Thakur says Chaitanya Deva and Radha and others have this highest type of ecstasy. But there's an advantage to us. Small adhar, it fills up easily. We don't need all of these other things. We can have the highest, we can reach the roof in a much easier way. That a little bit of devotion. He says, weep for God for 24 hours. Maintain truthfulness for 12 years. It's easier for us. We're lucky. We're lucky we were born in this Kali Yuga. It's easy. And just repeat the name of God and everything. Anyhow, these are different ways of looking at this spiritual journey in terms of this ascension, climbing. So we do things stage by stage, step by step by step. There's a little turning point where now we've realized I'm not the doer, and we can practice this real, for the Gyani, real renunciation, for the Bhakta, real surrender and acceptance, and we'll get pulled up to the roof. And in rare cases, some may actually get up there and have that ultimate merging at that time. Generally, we'll come back down again, and we'll live in the world as free souls, Jivan Muktas. So we have a little bit of time, sister, if anybody wants to ask a few questions.
Yes, if you have a question, you can send it through your chat box, and Swami.
Do I know how to do that, to see that?
I'll repeat the question to you.
Oh, okay.
Please go ahead, and now is your golden opportunity. Brother, you gave a very clear, distinct, step-by-step progression.
They can unmute if they want to just ask a question also.
Let me see if I can do that.
Kolinda. No question. Ranjana, I don't see your face.
Maharaj, what is the role of Diksha in the climbing the ladders?
Okay. I would say that Diksha hands the ladder to us so that we can start climbing. We can start on our own, but this really, I'll give it a different type of interpretation. Thakur says that imagine that there's a log. I like it better. Imagine that there's a treasure chest and it's buried in the bottom of the ocean, but there's a chain connected to that, and that we want to find that the treasure chest. That chain comes all the way out of the water, and Guru has that chain, and he hands us that chain. This is a Diksha. He hands us that chain, and he says, now, just go link by link by link. Link by link by link. And we'll reach the point where we reach the ocean. So this will be the second stage, then we dive in. And we go link by link by link, and then we get to that treasure. Otherwise, can we simply dive in the ocean and find it? Yeah, but what are the odds? It's possible. It's possible, but here it's certain. It's absolutely certain. If we don't let go of the chain and we go, we keep going one by one by one, we don't know how long it'll take, but it's absolutely, this is called Shraddha. that we have that faith. It's absolutely certain that if we continue link by link, and they'll have, no matter how long it takes, we don't care, we'll get to that treasure. So I look at this Guru handing us that chain, Diksha, initiation, that way. So now it's certain, but we can say now we're on that ladder, and all we have to do is go step by step by step, and we'll get to the roof for sure.
Brother, we have another question here.
Okay.
By Pursoon, is everything destined? We know nothing happens without God's will, so what is truly in our control?
Thakur was asked this question many times. He said, if you really know that, you're already free. But we have to assume that everything is in our control. We have to, this is Swamiji says that, a very interesting statement also, that act as if everything is up to you with regard to the work. Act as if everything is up to God with regard to the result. So when we talk about everything is the will of God, that doesn't mean that we don't have a role to play. It doesn't mean that karma doesn't have a role to play in all of this. It means that we don't know what the result will be. We can say that I tried my best. It wasn't Thakur's will, but we have to try our best. Otherwise, we won't make any progress in spiritual life. If we say that I am the machine, God is the operator, and then we do all sorts of things, it's absolute hypocrisy, 100% hypocrisy. Thakur was asked this question once, and he gave a funny answer. He said, if you eat chilies, won't your lips burn? Now, why did he give that answer? So what's that got to do with is the will of God, everything the will of God? What he was saying was that you get the results of your actions. And if we want to say the will of God, what is the will of God? The law of karma is also the will of God. That's the way everything was set up. So we have to act as if everything is under our control till we reach that point where we can see that this I that I'm talking about has no substance to it. We can say that everything is God's will when we realize that there's no I here. Once there was another conversation, and Thakur was saying that everything is God's will, and somebody said, yeah, but it's a death to us. And then Thakur said, but who are you? So as long as I think that I'm an individual, I'm an I have to take responsibility for my action. If I understand that this sense of I is just false identification with its personality, mind, and all of that, and that Mother alone dwells within, then of course everything is Mother's will. But we can't pretend that we have that understanding. And this is like trying to jump to the roof. We have to go step by step by step. So this is why the majority, 99% of climbing up the roof is climbing. And that means that self-effort, and it means taking responsibility. How many times has Thakur said that you have to work hard? He doesn't say at the very beginning, see this, everything is God's will. This is the goal. This to say that I'm a machine. Thakur could say that. We can't say that. This is what the fanatical religious people do, who do all sorts of horrible things in the world. They'll say it's God's will. This is I know God's will, that I'm destined to do this. That this is we're supposed to conquer the world and convert everybody. This is a horrible idea. If we have the highest realization, then we can't do anything harmful to anybody. This is the test. This is the test. If we really believe everything is God's will, then we won't be able to act selfishly. We won't be able to act in a harmful way. We won't be able to even say anything that will be harmful. Everything we do will be for the benefit of others. So this is the test. So we can't start out with this idea that we may be able to say that what happens is God's will. That's simply another way of saying we don't know why things happen. We do everything, it should lead to a certain result, it doesn't lead to it, so we say, what's God's will? We don't know exactly why things happen and why they don't happen. So in the beginning, we have to take responsibility for our actions. Thakur says this is why Mother gives the sense of I. Otherwise, we'll do all sorts of things. We have to really understand this very, very clearly, that we can't pretend that I'm the machine, mother's the operator. Whatever I do, it's actually mother working through me. There's tremendous ego behind that type of statement, unless we've rooted out every little last bit of selfishness from ourselves and attachment and ignorance and everything else. Then we can say it. Thakur could say it. Even Holy Mother, who actually, of course, could have said it, we don't find her speaking in these terms. So this is also a certain type of attitude that some people will take. The Gyani will say, I am everything. The Bhakta will say, I'm nothing. But there's not that much difference between the two. So yeah, this is another very important idea, that this is the final end of the journey, when we can say that everything is I do as you make me do, mother. We have the Duryodhana very hypocritically saying, yeah, I'll do as you make me do. You dwell in my heart. Don't blame me for anything. We can't take that attitude. It's a very hypocritical type of attitude.